Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Keep Indiana Learning. My name is Tim Arnold, and I'm very excited to be here today with my co-host, Brenny Coomer, and fellow innovation coaches, Nicole Nelson and John Wells, and a very special guest, Indiana educator, author, and EdTech superstar, Matt Miller. So this is episode 8 in our dual book study discussing AI in education. In this book study series, we'll dig into the books Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick and AI for Educators by our guest, Matt Miller. Whether you're here with us live or you join us later on the Keep Indiana Learning YouTube channel, we are here to explore these two wonderful books because we know as AI becomes increasingly integrated into society, it's crucial for educators to understand its potential to enhance teaching and learning while being mindful of its limitations. In our dual book study format, we'll take sections of books, bring some of the practical strategies and templates from AI for Educators into the discussion, as well as the research and examples from Co-Intelligence. Today, building on our discussion from the chapters in Co-Intelligence, we're digging into Chapter 5 of AI for Educators by Matt Miller. Before we dive in, let's do some introductions. Brenny, would you like to start us off?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. I'm Brenny Coomer. I'm the Assistant Director of EdTech in BCSC in Columbus, Indiana. I'm so excited for our discussions today. This has been on the calendar for a little bit, and I've just been counting down the days. So I love talking about AI, love talking about UDL. I'm also on the Indiana Connected Educators Board and an innovation coach with Keep Indiana Learning.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Wells. I'm a 32-year veteran, currently teaching at the Evansville Vandenberg School Corporation at Wrights High School. I teach ELA. I am currently the president of the Indiana Connected Educators Board, and I'm also one of the innovation coaches at Keep Indiana Learning.
Hi, everybody. I am Nicole Nelson. I'm the District Integrated Learning Coordinator for Lewis Cass Schools in Walton, Indiana. I've been in education for 25 years, primarily in K-1, as well as middle school STEM. I love focusing on blended learning and UDL strategies to help boost student engagement. And I've been an innovation coach for Keep Indiana Learning for the last 3 years, and I'm currently serving on the board of Indiana Connected Educators with Brenny and John.
Matt, why don't you go ahead?
Yes. Okay. Hi, I'm Matt Miller, high school Spanish teacher for 11 years out here in West Central Indiana, taught at North Vermilion High School and Turkey Run High School. Since then, I've gotten to work with schools and school districts all over the United States and beyond to help them with meaningful tech integration, with student engagement related to tech, and of course with AI. I live here in Park County, about 10 minutes away from Turkey Run State Park, which we're very fortunate to be so close to. And I've been, involved with the ICE conference and the HEC conference and with, Keep Indiana Learning, and have just been kind of like learning alongside this community probably for a good solid 10 years. And I'm just thrilled to get to participate with anything that you guys do.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. And all the way around the horn, my name is Tim Arnold. I'm a district e-learning specialist with the Richmond Community Schools. I spent 26 years as a 7 through 12 social studies educator, and I've been with Richmond then for the last 9. I'm an innovation coach with Keep Indiana Learning. I'm an Indiana University Distinguished Jacobs Educator, and I serve as a member of the HEC board. Well, wow, what a group we've got today, and we're here looking at Chapter 5 of this wonderful book. We're going to start with a little bit of a, off-the-cuff question. We've all been very involved in artificial intelligence as it pertains to education. And so the question to start today is, if we all went back to November of 2022 and we got a redo or a do-over on the first few months that we had with AI in education, what would we do differently?
I'll dive in. I would do a lot of things differently for starters. Number one, not panic as much and think that AI was going to take over the world like Skynet, which is also great that it's referenced in this chapter. That was like my fears. when I first learned about these tools. I remember sitting in my office, and our special education director, he'd always like pop by of a window in my office door. But like the day that he told me about ChatGPT, because I hadn't really heard about it, his face was in the window and it was all red. And he was like banging on the glass and he was like, "You need to look at this tool right now." And we talked about it and we were super scared. So that's one thing I would do differently. But then also we bought an AI detection tool and I don't love that. And I feel super icky about it still. I think in the moment it was a very knee-jerk reaction and I understand where the concern was coming from. But knowing what I know now, I would go back and be like, slow your roll, think through this a little bit differently. So I think that's a good segue into a lot of the things we're talking about today.
I would just build on that too. I think there was just this overwhelming fear at first and this overreaction. And it would have been nice to be able just to, okay, hold on. Okay, what do we got here, right? And to take a look at it with an open mindset. I think a lot of us started off on the wrong foot, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible. What is going to happen? Instead of, hey, what can we do with this, right? I think maybe we got started on the wrong foot.
John actually just took the words right out of my mouth. Open-minded, I think, was what I was getting ready to say, that I wish that we could have, kind of walked into it and just been like, what is this? And how does it work? And what can it do? And let's try it for a little while. I love, by the way, that in co-intelligence that Ethan Mollick, and in his Substack, also one useful thing, that he says that the best training that you can get for tools like ChatGPT and for a lot of these AI tools is 10 hours. 10 hours of just practicing with it and trying it and seeing what it's capable of and what it's not capable of and what it's good at and what it's not good at. And I wish more people would have been willing, even if they didn't have the 10 hours, at least if they would give 10 minutes, they would have been more, and we all, I think also, would have been more informed on what it actually is and what it does before we started jumping to all these conclusions and setting policies and blocking and banning and doing all of that stuff. I think if we could have all just been open-minded, I think that would have been great.
Yeah, I guess for me, I would go back to, I wish I would have thought to say, remember the calculator, remember Google, right? These things did change education, but we've all found a way to persist with them. We know how to integrate them. We know how to work with them. They're going to be a part of our lives. And this is going to be very similar. I wish I would have had the presence of mind or maybe the view of the future to say that at the time. And I really didn't, because like all of you, it just kind of hit us in the face one day and said, hey, this is here.
Yeah. Our school district was very much like, shh, keep it quiet. If we don't talk about it, then it doesn't exist. And we can go on pretending that, things always were the way that they will be, the way they always were. And so I wish that I would have been more, hey, this thing is out here. Let's all take a few minutes and just see what it can do. And then, kind of go from there. But break that habit of let's stick our heads in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist.
And Nicole, isn't it wild how many people did that? Like there were so many people who were just like, okay, let's not pretend. I can't tell you how many people said, I don't want to let the genie out of the bottle by talking about it. I want to open up Pandora's box. And I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, wouldn't you rather get a handle on this and have some sort of guidance over it rolling out and people finding out about it instead of like kids doing this and looking things up on TikTok that they can do and like, that becomes their education. And it's just, Nicole, I'm just glad you brought that up because there's so many people who just lost their minds and were like, let's just pretend like it doesn't exist. And I'm like,
Yeah.
So let's dig into that a little bit because these are real concerns and real fears faced by people with students right in front of them, right? So right from the book, the right in the opening part of chapter 5, the quote, block it, ban it, stop the cheating. And this has been a consistent cry and a worry. So let's talk a little bit about, for each of us, how that has changed in the last couple of years since, let's say, 2023 when the book came out. How is that? What's different about that now? Or what's the conversation that we're having now that maybe we didn't have at the beginning?
Well, I'll say after having been to a bunch of schools and school districts over the last few years and going to education conferences and hearing presenters speak about it. And by the way, I also have to say that those are two completely separate things. The way that I hear speakers and talking heads talk about AI versus the real conversations that are happening in schools, a lot of times those are about very different things. But in both places, I've seen the conversation progress, because it started out with, what is this? This is bad. Let's block it. And I think we were thinking, just like Nicole said earlier, like maybe it doesn't exist, or maybe it'll just be a passing fad and everything. And then after that, it was like, let's figure out a way to detect it. We've got plagiarism detectors like Turnitin. There's got to be a detector for this. And of course, the market always, and if there's a demand, the market will supply a product. And so we ended up with these plagiarism detectors, and then we started to see some of the fallout of that. And I think once we started to bottom out of that just a little bit, I started to see the conversations take a little bit of a more productive turn. We're not there yet. We're not totally at the top of the upslope, but I feel like we're starting to take a productive turn where we're starting to see, okay, this can be useful in certain ways. And I think we're starting to see that it's like fire, right? It can be used in good ways and bad ways. It can be used to, heat our homes and heat our food. And it can also be used to harm people and burn down buildings. But it just depends on how it's used. And so I've started to see, I don't know about you all, but I've started to see all of those negative conversations take somewhat of a positive turn. And we're starting to see a little bit more balanced, nuanced conversation about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd love to know what, sorry, John.
No, go ahead, Nicole. Go ahead.
I'd love to know what kind of led that conversation turn. What do you see as, the key that can shift that conversation? Because that is still very much the conversation that's being had where I am at, from I read a comment from a teacher recently that said, students need to know how to form their own thoughts and transfer it to paper. And AI is not going to be the tool that helps them do that. Writing strictly needs to happen on paper from start to finish. It needs to be the student's work. And so, what can be the key to make that shift?
So I'll just throw my 2 cents on this real quick and then defer to the rest of the panel here. I think to some extent, it's got to be the same thing that we've been doing with instructional strategies and instructional technology for years and years and years and years. And that is that we have to start to see some concrete, practical examples that make sense to the teacher, and we have to keep it in line with what their goals are too. Now, what makes that really hard sometimes is when we don't think that their goals are in line with what's best for kids. And so whenever there's that sort of disconnect, then there's a lot of paradigm shifting that has to happen, right? So what you're describing to me anyway is it's from the point of how the technology is being deployed and what the assignment looks like, all the way up to the bigger picture of why are we here in school? What is the purpose of us being here? What are we trying to prepare students for? And when that big picture goal isn't in line, and when the little point isn't in line, then it's like there's all of these big conversations. But I think, I found anyway that talking in generalities and theory a lot of times is a hard way to try to change somebody's mind. And when you start to see what their goals are and what they're trying to accomplish, and you say, okay, this is where you want to go, here's a way that you can get there. That's one of the very few places where I've started to see meaningful change in conversations.
Yeah, agree. Nicole, I would say, and it's a quote from this book, I think page 79, it said, once you accept the idea that thinking and using AI are not mutually exclusive, then you can take that next step, like that they can work together. So one of the early tough conversations that I had with teachers was that, yes, we're going to have to change your assignment. Yes, the 5-paragraph essay is never going to be the same. Maybe we could grade part of the process, or maybe we can be very clear about how and when to use AI. There are all these things that we can do to kind of make small shifts or turns that's going to make AI available. We don't want to create an equity issue because we know some kids are going to have access to it no matter what, and some aren't. So we want to make sure we don't do anybody a disservice or create any barriers where there don't need to be any. But there are small shifts that we can make. And those are the tough conversations, I think, that we had early with a few people, but we're having more and more with larger groups of people.
Mm-hmm. And, and Nicole, you started off with this, and I was getting ready to say almost the same thing. I think the biggest driver right now is proximity. I think back of like when the math teachers were losing their minds over photo math a few years ago. And I was like, oh, that's kind of tough for you, right? But I'm in English. It doesn't matter to me, right? And now, we've got these people that, like, okay, I'm in the trenches right now. I'm dealing with it. It's in my classroom. It's in my roundhouse. It's in my, right here in my world, And I think once people start to see like, okay, this is here, and it's applicable to me, then I think that really starts to push that conversation, and people start to think a little bit more like, okay, let's have those conversations. Let's have those discussions. Let's think about this a little bit more.
I would agree with what everyone has been saying. And to quote a math department chair, speaking to one of our English teachers at a recent training, welcome to the club, talking about like photo math and calculators. It's really fun working through all this, isn't it? But I think a lot of showing examples has been helpful, and then having those tough conversations too. And coming from a UDL perspective, I'm always thinking like, what's the true goal? What are we really wanting our students to do? And what are we really trying to measure? And if the goal is getting them to express their thoughts, there's a lot of different ways that they can do that in different supports. So it's just thinking about what we want our students to do and how we can get them there, and also just teach them how to be great humans. We've been leading some different AI things in our district this year. We actually been reading Matt's book as a part of it. I have a group of 90 teachers and I meet with once in 9 weeks for 3.5 hours. And in reading Matt's book, but then also reading Co-Intelligence, realized I need just time to practice with these tools. And I had several English teachers who joined this pathway who, when I saw them register, I was like, oh, they've told me they don't like these AI tools. They've been like really vocal against it. So this is interesting that they signed up for this pathway, but it's been so productive having them tinker, see these tools, see that you have to really be a critical thinker and evaluate and assess and write at a pretty high level to get the outputs that you want. And that's really done a 180 for them. And some of these teachers who were the first ones to ask me for an AI detection tool and to ban it are now the ones who I was in one of their classrooms last week, and they're having conversations with students and modeling how to use the tool in real time. And it was just like one of those moments where I was like, look at this, these conversations matter so much. And it took a while to get there, but we eventually got there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brittany, I was just going to say, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think especially at the beginning, it's like, you don't know what you don't know. And whenever you don't even know what you don't know and you're scared and your status quo is changing and you feel like you got to do something, then what do? You take action to protect yourself and to preserve yourself. And I think we had a lot of that happen. And then once the emotions started to settle down, and like you said, those teachers signed up for that pathway. Good on them for showing up and at least trying to understand this thing that they've been so vocally against. And then all of a sudden, we're all able to make smarter, more informed decisions because we've been willing to open our eyes and take a deep breath and let our nerves settle down. And then we can start to, make smarter decisions about what's best for kids.
Yeah,
I
think that's the key right there.
Like protect. Oh, I'm sorry. If again, could Matt, you're saying like protect, like I almost wonder if, like, going back to your original comment where you said like having these big conversations about school and what are we doing here, it's almost like some of those discussions were protecting what we want school to be now or what we're comfortable with instead of like letting those changes occur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry, Nicole.
The key that you were talking about, Brenny, with letting them tinker and figure out that you have to be a critical thinker to figure out how do I need to design this prompt to get what I want, and then going back and analyzing what it came back with and and figuring out, that wasn't quite there. I like this part, but I don't like this part. That takes a different level of critical thinking. And as I was tinkering with all of the AI platforms and figuring out, which one worked best and how do I need to design my prompt, I was realizing, that's a different level of just dropping it into the internet and then figuring out which website I wanted to go to. So the more the teachers have time to play around with it, I think that they will realize that as well, and maybe that will help bridge that gap too.
Yeah, nice. For me, the moment I think in this chapter, it was a Ken Shelton quote that really brought these two books together. And Brenny's nodding, so I know she saw the same one. Replace the term AI with classmate or friend at school, because that really pushes us to where we want to go in that conversation as AI as a thought partner. That is absolutely where we want to live at this point. And so that was, I thought for me, man, I wish I would have thought of that a couple of years ago. That would have been a great way for me to bridge the gap or explain to people I was working with where we're going and what we're doing, because conversations and collaborative work have always been a big part of what we think and we know schools should be about. And this is just another avenue to pursue that.
Don't you feel like a lot of the conversations we're having, some of the concerns, I'm not going to say all concerns because there are some legit concerns out there, but some of the like academic integrity concerns, don't you feel like some of those are the exact same conversations we've been having in education for ages, just through a different lens, just with a different type of technology? And even before technology too. I mean, you can go all the way back to Plato. And Plato bemoaned the creation of books, of printed books, because nobody's ever going to memorize anything, and you're not going to have to remember anything if you can just look it up in a book. And now where are we today? Books are a cornerstone and a hallmark of our society and of our education, right? So yeah, that day when I had that conversation with Ken and he said that, and I was like, yeah, that gets down to the that cuts to the quick,
And to segue on Ken and Matt quotes, I think it was at a conference I saw both of you talking together. And one of the profound things I learned from both of you is that, all right, so we're having these questions of academic integrity with students. And like they've been doing this. This is not something new where we've questioned this. But the real question we need to be asking is, if a student did use AI to write their whole paper, why? Why did they do that? And typically it's, they feel stressed. There's anxiety about the assignment, they're short on time, or they don't feel confident enough to do it. And I think that really, if you approach it from that angle, it's a much more productive conversation than, I'm going to fail you on this assignment because you used AI and I didn't give you permission to do it, right? There's usually something a lot more important that's below the surface of that. And that's the important part of being a teacher, is getting to know the reason why the student did it and having that conversation so that we can do better in the future or figure out what supports the students need to be successful later on.
Yeah, 100%. In that same vein, I just came across a thing. Actually, I saw it on TikTok. It's a Chrome extension called AI Trust You. And the guy talking about it was Adam Spark from Short Answer. Right. When I know he's going to be making the rounds in Indiana this summer. So if you get a chance to see him, please do. But Short Answer, great gamified writing tool. Go see that. But what AI Trust You does is it lets students tell you up front where they used it and at what point they used AI in the process. And it also allows teachers to be very clear and say, here's where it's encouraged, or here's where it's required, and here's where it's prohibited. So it shifts that culture that you're talking about, Brenny, from suspicion to support. From fear to curiosity. It actually enables that conversation that we all need to have with our students.
To piggyback on that, I've been working with a guy named Elliot Hedman, who used to work, I think, at the MIT Media Lab, and he's into developing things like that too. And he's created I think it's a Google Docs extension called Level Up, and it's a lot of the same thing. It's like transparency with writing and working with students to like figure out how AI is used responsibly in writing and everything. And so I'm going to drop the link into the private chat. I don't know how we like distribute this kind of stuff out, but that's one that he reached out to me early on, and we kind of worked together to come up with what he's got. And I thought that what he came away with after consulting with dozens and dozens of teachers, this is what he came up with, and I thought this was pretty great too.
Okay, so let's say crystal ball time. What are the next or new challenges that the educational community is going to face with AI as we go forward? Let's say, we went backwards 2 years, 3 years. Now let's go forward 2 or 3 years. And let's wind this up by talking a little bit about what we think is coming to us in the near future.
If I'm thinking of something that I hope to see, I think seeing AI used for higher order thinking tasks and complex and critical thinking. I see a lot of its uses being used for like real quick things, which has its place every now and then. But I want to see it taking learning activities and assignments and projects to heights that wouldn't be possible without it. Now, what that looks like, I have no idea. That's my pie in the sky type of thinking, but in ways that it can power our students' learning and get them excited and get teachers excited and help teachers design activities that can reach every student's needs. That's where I would like to see AI going.
Yeah, I would love to, and really my focus, I think, for the next school year is going to be on, the individualized tutoring or education or learning experience for kids, for certain groups of kids, or whatever the case may be. That how can I make sure that we are utilizing AI to its fullest to really grow people in a way that's going to be beneficial to them?
Yeah, Tim, you're talking about a barrier that has existed in education pretty much forever, for at least from the one teacher to many students. And that is that there's only one of me and there's 24 of them. And so it means that there's a lot of things that I can't do. And so some of those barriers in the, single human in charge of, 24 tiny humans, whenever you've got that sort of relationship, there's limitations to what we can do. And so I think it starts to be able to scale. Of course, I think the thing that we've got to be careful of too is trying to scale the things that are not scalable in humanity, right? So it's like trying not to turn over the wrong things, actually turning over the best things of humanity to AI, because AI doesn't do them in the same way that a human does. I think that's one of the big fears that I have going forward is that, yes, we can personalize. Yes, we can scale. But when we start to get, I don't want to throw superintendents under the bus, but we'll just say school leaders in general. When we get school leaders that start to look at the budget and they start to look at their teacher shortages, and especially, it goes right to the top of government. Whenever we continue to slash and slash and slash the budgets that we give and the resources that we put in the hands of teachers, it makes really hard decisions have to be made. And so if some of those hard decisions become, well, maybe AI can do this, and we start to farm it out too much to AI, we start to really get into scary, scary places. Sorry, you all have been so optimistic and positive about the crystal ball time. And then I just turned it. And then the other word that I have written down on my notes is deep fakes. See, I don't know I don't know how I ended up in such a negative place, but it's maybe what we've got to do, right? Is we've got to have a nice balanced approach to all of this stuff. I think that's maybe, I won't go on and on about deepfakes, but I will say that, outside of the confines of the classroom, I think that's one thing that we're starting to see a teeny tiny bit about in our, in the news and everything that, Ethan Mollick talks about how eventually there are going to be those bad actors, right? There's going to be negative things that are going to happen. And so I think if we at least educate ourselves on that, if we're looking into the crystal ball and we see that maybe that's coming, we educate ourselves a little bit about it before it gets here.
Yeah, 100%.
Digital citizenship, when the computers came out, we need the AI literacy lessons now that we have all of this, this huge world of the unknown, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's no doubt in my mind that if you take both of these books that we're looking at, that the human in the loop is a key and will continue to be a key. So, so thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to our guests, especially to Matt Miller, for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed our conversation and digging into this text, and we have a few discussion questions, as always, to consider before signing off. First one is, how can educators make small shifts to leverage AI as a creative partner to develop more engaging lessons and projects for themselves and their students? What are some examples of ways AI could inspire student creativity in your classroom? And what is one example from today that you think you could use with your students? If not tomorrow, then very soon. So ponder these questions and let us know your responses. And we have a couple of more of these amazing discussions and sharing opportunities throughout the semester as part of this live stream series. But be sure to join us next time as Brittany Coomer leads our discussion on Ethan Mollick's book, Co-Intelligence. It'll be chapters 9 in the epilogue, so please join us. Thank you all for being here today, and have a great one.